Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University.
Welcome to Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University, Ahmedabad, established by the Government of Gujarat. I am here at Chaitanya Studio in the Jyotirmay Parisar of Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University. Knowledge Partner, Knowledge Management and Research Organization. The paper coordinator and reviewer is Dr. Pawan Pandit, Director, JJ Institute of Business Administration, Ahmedabad. And I am Dr. Dhaval Kataria, Assistant Professor, JG College of Commerce, Ahmedabad. Today, we are dealing with paper BSWR for the course of Bachelor of Social Work. The paper that we are dealing with is 103 Communicative English. We are dealing with Block 1, that is Introduction to Communication. In that, we are dealing with Unit 1, that is Communication, Introduction, Evolution and Definitions. Now, we are going to start with Topic 2, that is Evolution of Communication. Through this video, through this lecture, the learning objectives will be the student will know and understand the evolution of communication. Why is communication needed? The first question when we need to understand about the evolution of communication is, why is this needed in the first place? There are plenty of emotions, feelings and thoughts that a person needs to convey to his fellow human beings. And that is why we need communication. If we look at history of communication, the history of communication is long and complex. The cavemen, who were the first initiative part of human civilization, communicated their feelings through body language and signs. Slowly, man started to use specific symbols to represent certain things. Specific sounds were produced to convey specific feelings. With that, the language and script evolved. Millions of years ago, man produced sounds and made gestures to convey the three most basic feelings of joy, fear, and sorrow. The gestures and sounds were made using facial expressions, gestures, body language, and sounds, which were the most basic forms of communication used by man. In fact, even today, these are the most basic forms of communication. Now, the first form of communication can be seen as cave paintings. Look at this picture that is taken from a cave, which shows a story. There could be a possible story of people, a group of people going somewhere, or that is somewhere that they have gone for a hunt and they have collected something to eat and they are moving towards their homes, or it could be that they are traveling towards another state or another territory. The story is mentioned through a picture. That is cave painting as a form of communication. Cave paintings can be considered as one of the oldest forms of communication. Theorists believe that cave paintings were done to mark the territories and even to record certain important events. The oldest cave painting was found inside Chauvet Cave in France so many years before. That is almost 30,000 before Christ. Other earlier cave paintings are discovered in South Sulawesi, Indonesia, and even in a few caves in Romania. Then came the symbols. Many variations of signs and symbols have been developed to communicate. Around 10,000 before Christ, petroglyphs were created, which are carvings in the surface of the rocks, and they are also referred to as rock art. Around 9000 BC, pictograms were developed through which ancient people used logographic images for telling a story. Later on, many primeval cultures developed ideograms. Egyptians had their own hieroglyphs. The Chinese culture created characters. Lastly, the alphabet, through which language and communication was redefined, was developed around 2000 before Christ. Now, what are pictograms? Pictograms, used in the earliest of times as a means of communication, is a pictorial representation for a word or a phrase. For example, when we are driving somewhere where we have seen so many pictures, so many signs and so many billboards just next to our roads. A few of them are here. Can you identify them? A few of them, which can mean traffic signal or U-turn, or there are many other mentioned here. Bump ahead, or railway crossing ahead, or school ahead, or diversions ahead, parking, no parking, all these are called pictograms. That means a picture that is used to represent a word or a phrase, which is easier, which does not need education, which does not need literacy, the person can still understand. That is why pictograms are important. Cuneiform. Cuneiform, that is another tool for communication, is also one of the earliest forms of writing. It dates back to the 4th millennium before Christ. It began as a way to keep track of commodities, and then it was developed into a form of accounting, like this. Fire. Smoke signals and fire as a means of communication. Now, if you have seen a few movies, it can be animated or the regular movies, there have been there have been situations where fires have been presented as a signal to communicate different messages. Smoke signals, that is over and above symbols and letters, ancient people relied on natural elements to communicate as well. Fire, as you know, is one of the natural elements, and we have been relying on natural elements to communicate. Smoke signals were basically used to send messages in China, and how and when they were used? Around the time of 200 before Christ, the guards performed smoke signals to send messages along the Great Wall of China. Around 150 before Christ, Greek historian Polybius developed smoke signals representing the alphabet. We all know about this. Carrier pigeons who are used to send and receive messages. Why so? Pigeons have been naturally gifted with great direction sense. Over 2000 years ago, the ancient Romans used pigeons as primary messengers between military men. In the 12th century, messenger pigeons were used widely. According to naval chaplain Henry Tiong, pigeons were used as a postal service by merchants. Pigeons also played an important role in World Wars I and II. And not just pigeons, in fact, birds like hawks are also used to send and receive messages. Messengers. Now, if we have to send messages to a long distance place, then messengers were also sent from one place to another on foot or on horses. These messengers went from one kingdom to another kingdom with the messages that could be on horses or on foot. Then came the postal services. During the ancient period, Egyptians used courier service to send out decrees in 2400 before Christ. Till today, a piece of mail dating back to 255 before Christ is kept preserved. Postal systems had also been organized in Persia, China, India, and Rome earlier. In 1653, Frenchman de Valère started a postal system in Paris involving the use of mailboxes and distribution of envelopes that was paid. With the development came the newspaper. something that we every day see in the morning. In 1440, German Johannes Gutenberg is said to have developed the printing press system, which radically changed communication forever. With that, newspapers began to flourish in the 16th century. The German language publication of Johann Carolus in Strasbourg in 1605 was the first newspaper. The first newspaper in English was published in Amsterdam in 1620. Then came the radio. After print media flourished, radio was also developed. In 1830s, many scientists like Maxwell and Hughes worked on wireless telegraphy, which led to the development of theory of electromagnetism. In 1888, Heinrich Rudolf Hertz discovered and named Hertzian waves. In 1893, Tesla started using wireless power to transmit content. In the early 20th century, broadcasting through radio began. After the radio came the telegraph. I believe all of you have seen the movie Razi, in which one of the characters, Sehmat, that is played by Alia Bhatt, uses this telegraph messaging system to send messages. Telegraph communication started after Morse code was invented by Samuel Morse. Morse code encoded the ISO basic Latin alphabet. The Morse code was able to transmit messages through a series of clicks, tones, and lights. In 1830, Morse integrated the Morse code in telegraphy technology that revolutionized the long-distance communication. In 1844, Morse sent his first telegraph message. Then came the telephone. The telegraphy was immediately replaced by the telephone. It was invented by Scottish Alexander Graham Bell in 1876. The telephone acts in the telecommunication device that converts human audio signals to electronic signals which are transmitted via cables. It was further developed to commercially cater to local and long-distance calls. In the 1900s, landline telephone service began. Up until now, the telephone remained one of the most reliable telecommunication services. Then came the television. Along with telephones, television started to become a mode of indirect communication to the mass audience. The television was not just invented by a single person but developed through the efforts of various brilliant people. The earliest records of TV broadcasting occurred after the World War II, in which the display was still black and white. And then came the internet. After the creation of computers in the 1950s, the ARPANET was developed, which was the early predecessor of the internet. The ARPANET was designed to manage communication between ARPA computer terminals in the 1960s. The term internet first emerged in 1973. The first internet service provider was the Telenet. In 1983, the domain system started. In 1991, Tim Berners-Lee, a scientist at CERN, introduced the World Wide Web, that is WWW, which definitely started the modern internet. And then, with the onset of internet came the emails. With the onset of the internet, electronic mails started to become popular. Although emails came way before the ARPANET, it was still offline. In 1975, John Whittle developed a software to organize emails. From that time, 75% of ARPANET traffic was email. In 1994, Yahoo was born. It was followed by other mailing platforms like Hotmail and Google Mail. Then came the text messages. The first official SMS messaging took place on December 3, 1992, when Neil Papworth, an engineer from SEMA Group, now known as Airwide Solutions, used a computer to send Merry Christmas through the Vodafone network. In 1994, the Radio Linja was the first network service provider to carry out person-to-person text messaging. Now, SMS has evolved, in which over 9 trillion SMS are sent every year. And then came the social media. The latest mode of communication in the digital era is the use of social media platforms. It has become more available because of the proliferation of smartphones, where social media apps can easily be installed. In 2004, Facebook was created by Mark Zuckerberg. Today, the Messenger is one of the most widely used messaging apps. There are more than 2 billion Facebook users worldwide. In 2005, YouTube became the first ever popular video hosting social media site. In 2006, Twitter began to dominate the social media scene. Other social media platforms have followed. Before we go on to conclusion, let us look at the situation right now. Today, when you need to communicate, what are the ways in which you communicate? You can send messages on WhatsApp, you can DM someone, you can send text messages, you can email. This is right now, that is 2021. What did you do to communicate a few years earlier? You could have sent text messages. Do you remember sending postcards and greeting cards to your neighbors and relatives because of any celebrations or festivities? Writing letters. Before that, when you needed to communicate, when you did not know how to write, you spoke out. That is how you communicated. Before that, before you did not know the words, you communicated through shouts, through tears, through crying, through smiling. So as you evolve as a person, communication also evolves. Similarly, as the humankind evolves, communication also evolved. That is why, coming to the conclusion, communication has gone through a lot of stages before it became so convenient and efficient that it is today. Thus, our role, by the way, is to use these communication tools responsibly and in the right way.
स्वाध्यायः